Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this really quick webinar slash workshop on licensing technology from New Mexico research institutions. We're kind of hosting this workshop as a means to broaden the innovation ecosystem and really start people's thought processes down. Is there a really great piece of technology I can license? How do I go about doing that? What are the things I need to know about working with? This afternoon, we'll have 3 of the research institutions from New Mexico who will actually talk, present, and just give some guidance on what do you need to have in hand before you want to work with that institution. A really quick bit of background. This is the 4th session in a series of workshops we did about intellectual property. And you might think, well, you gave a series of workshops on intellectual property. Why are you talking about licensing? Well, a lot of times licensing can go hand in hand with intellectual property. Research institutions, universities, federally funded research and development centers, national labs, everybody has a research mission. They're putting together work, they're actually figuring things out. They're kind of stretching the boundary of what we know about science and how the world works. And oftentimes that leads to these really great discoveries. But then those discoveries can just kind of sit there while someone tries to figure out how to make a product out of it, how to actually get that into the marketplace, how to leverage that for business development and growth. That's when licensing really does come into play. You want to be able to license technology from these research institutions. You want to take what they did for that basic research and put some applied research towards that. How do I make this a product? How do I turn this into something that somebody's willing to buy? How do I actually push this further along? Do some customer discovery, figure out what the value proposition is, figure out why people would be interested in this. How do I market this? What do I need to know? And really, the first step along that pathway is just figuring out, well, how do I even contact these institutions? How do I get started, going down that line? How do I get a hold of them and just have that initial conversation? What do I need to have in hand? And that's why we have this webinar / workshop, however you want to slice that, today. So today you're going to hear from 3 of the research institutions across New Mexico. You're going to hear from Los Alamos National Labs, New Mexico State University, and then Sandia National Labs. And their representatives are going to take about 15 minutes to kind of just talk with you, talk about what are those steps, what do people need to know, what do they really need to be aware of before they make that decision? Is this the right, let's call it project for me? Is this the right pathway I need to take for business development and growth? Is this the right approach for actually expanding my intellectual property portfolio? So timing-wise, you're going to hear from LANL first, and then New Mexico State University, and then Sandia. And what we want to do is we have a decent amount of time. We'll have probably about 10 minutes or so at the end for questions and answers. So what I'd like to do is, if you could, please hold your questions until the end of the 3 presentations. Because we want to be able to give each institution time for them to talk, time for their representative to talk, and to address the points and concerns that they have, or the things that they think you might need to focus on before you reach out to them. So we're going to hear from LANL now. I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen to talk about Los Alamos and their process, what you need to know, and things you need to consider. Kathleen, the floor is yours.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
There we go. Okay. All right. So thanks, everybody. I'm Kathleen McDonald. I actually may ask Julia to share slide content for me, just because I'm having a little bit of difficulty with my slide deck. So Julia, if you are able to do that, that would be great. Otherwise, I can continue to try on my end. And then let me try one other thing too. All right, I see she's got them up. Okay, thank you. All right, so as I mentioned, Kathleen McDonald from Los Alamos National Lab. I'm the division leader for the Feynman Center. So if we want to go to the next slide, what I'll walk you guys through is a little bit about who we are, what we think about tech transfer, and what that means in terms of moving technology out of the laboratory into the marketplace. So the Feynman Center is what you might think of as the traditional technology transfer office for the laboratory. For us, what this includes is not only entering into sponsored research agreements, which I'll talk a little bit more about, but those take on the flavor of, projects that are funded either with federal dollars or non-federal dollars for us to collaborate with industry, but it also includes the activity of intellectual property development and management, as well as licensing of that technology. Because not all labs are the same in terms of how they handle those activities within one office. But for the purpose of LANL, those all fall within one office. And of course, we do that under the auspices of both federal and state requirements related to programs that are funded through both streams of revenue. So next slide. A little bit in terms of how we think about impact. So a large part of what we do in Feynman is not just about getting a license at the end of the day. We really, really, really want to educate our researchers and innovators about things around how you move technology out of the laboratory into the marketplace, because that's how we, can help create impact. And, specifically to New Mexico, driving new innovation into New Mexico companies so that we can help the economy in New Mexico specifically. And then even developing new mechanisms for more entrepreneurial activities. Next slide. So at a high level, these are just a few things to think about in terms of what technology transfer is. You heard me mention these things in the context of how our office is structured, but technology transfer for us consists of intellectual property, primarily in the form of a patent application, or something that's in copyrightable form that we can transact business around. It could be a partnership agreement, which I also mentioned in the context of sponsored research, which would enable us to work with a company. And then licensing, which would mean usually the vehicle that we're going to grant rights to that intellectual property and the first item above to allow a partner to practice our technology. It also, for us at LANL, is technical assistance, so that we can help businesses solve technical challenges. And then finally, that entrepreneurial training and development component, which is so important for us, not only in the region, but nationally in terms of moving technologies into the marketplace. Next slide. So this is an important slide for us because at opposite ends of the spectrum, right, you've got basic and applied R&D and global investments in technology, but there's a whole bunch of things that have to happen in between to kind of have that magic moment. And they're best illustrated by, what we've got, in terms of the center triangles around having, a technology roadmap to demo, which is critical for us to find the right company and technology fit for that, that synergy to occur. And so that's what we're constantly striving for, but it's not always an easy thing to do. And that's kind of why there is an art form to the practice of technology transfer. Next slide. So then the why, when, and how to engage with the Feynman Center for Innovation. So there's different ways to engage with researchers to solve technical challenges. And we've got a couple of different programs, even specifically in the state of New Mexico, to do that. You'll hear more about the New Mexico Small Business Assistance Program and the Technology Readiness Gross Receipts Tax Program. But there are other researchers that reach out to us either through federal funding opportunities to help them, or even when they just know about that a set of expertise that a set of researchers might have here at LANL and they want to fund us to help them solve a problem. I think it's also important to always keep in mind how we coordinate technology development and deployment objectives that are supportive of other important programs like SBIRs and STTRs, because those are a very important way to help get to a technical solution that then can be redeployed. There definitely is importance around having an intent for our researchers to work with industry, academia, or anyone else outside of LANL. This is something that we keep in mind anytime that we've got opportunities in front of us around a capability that could have utility to audiences or users outside of the laboratory. And when we have a business development executive that is aware of a capability, for example, that has the potential for intellectual property creation, this is something that they're keeping in mind. Finally, we want to be sure that we are always aware of how to commercialize technology and how our researchers are aware of those capabilities. So that, ties back to our training programs as far as how we can really, broaden the impact and broaden how we cast our net. And then, of course, for any just general questions, you've got the website link there that can be useful as a starting point to figure out who you need to talk to in Feynman. Next slide. So something that's important to us is how we think about building an innovation value chain. And if you think about a couple slides back, that kind of magic moment where the two triangles meet, this is part of that. But this is more of a linear trajectory of how that happens. So you'll see on the left-hand side, we've got technology opportunities, moving to the right, exploring an opportunity, and then developing the opportunity. And there's lots of different steps that happen along that pathway, and different types of agreements and events that occur. So we might have disrupt tech, where you've got PIs that have an interesting idea about a technology and where it might be applied. We might work with a company to explore potential opportunities under a non-disclosure agreement to see if there's really a there. We might have those researchers go through our entrepreneurial postdoc program. At the same time, we'll have that technology posted as a technology snapshot to ensure that the rest of the world knows about the technology and enables us to meet our fairness of opportunity requirements. Then we move through, all the way through to the right, where hopefully we have an outcome that may be, a New Mexico lab embedded entrepreneurship partnership, or a technology readiness gross receipts tax project that comes out of it. We could have a cooperative research and development agreement. We could have a license, or we could have a small business assistance program, or we could have a strategic partnership project with a non-federal entity. Any of those outcomes are, a great point for us to say, hey, look, we're really moving a technology, out the doorway. But there are lots of different ways to get to where we want to go. Next slide. A little bit about technology snapshots. So you'll find more about this on our website, and I would encourage you to check out the link that's provided. Again, these are snapshots that explain technologies that we have that we are looking to potentially partner around. They come in both the form of things that are patentable or have been patented, or that may be protected through copyright for software types of tools. And then we use these snapshots for a couple of different reasons. But first and foremost, they help us meet our fairness of opportunity requirement. But more importantly, they also help us evaluate, based upon interest we get back from them, the kinds of commercial applications that might actually be out there in terms of looking to begin our customer identification or taking our customer identification steps. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about Disrupt Tech beforehand. Again, this is a program that we've had 7 cohorts go through. It's a really exciting program. You'll see some statistics about it on the right-hand side of the slide. But it's something that I think we're very excited about in terms of the penetration that we've had into the research community at LANL, but also promoting small businesses' awareness about the technologies that are coming out of the laboratory. Some things that we are truly excited about, right, is the number of researchers, particularly postdocs, that have transitioned into the postdoc entrepreneurship program from Disrupt Tech, again, continuing in that theme of training around entrepreneurial concepts. We've had 4 cooperative R&D agreements executed, and then we've had 4 strategic sponsored projects with non-federal entities executed, meaning that we're, again, moving from the left to the right of the spectrum in terms of moving an idea into the realm of possibility as far as doing additional targeted research around a potential technology and its application. Next slide. A little bit more about the UC Entrepreneurship Postdoc Program. You heard me mention it just now in terms of individuals that have transitioned into it from the Disrupt Tech program, but we've also had some other significant outcomes that you'll see. Some of the most exciting ones are that, we've had $13 million in follow-up funding for further technology development, which is really exciting to see be applied to these technologies that were, quite early stage. Next slide. So moving our technology to a license, I think this is really important because the license is really the way that we transact business around the technology and how we move technology out the door. It really starts with identification of intellectual property and creation of that intellectual property as a result of a technology that's contemplated through some of those programs I just mentioned to you. And then how do we protect it? How do we file for a patent application? Then working with the company to determine how are they going to use the intellectual property and how does it fit into the industry's value chain? Then, creating a license agreement and negotiating terms that are going to be, hopefully generate success for the company that will then the laboratory can share in that success. Again, a critical reminder is that there's no work ever performed under a license. The license itself is really just a transaction that grants a company rights to practice the technology itself. Work would be performed under a sponsored research agreement of some type, such as a technical assistance agreement or a strategic partnership project or cooperative R&D agreement. Next slide. This is a little bit about DOE licensing requirements. We don't need to go into this at length, other than just letting you know that there are requirements that we have to meet as part of our license, and you would see those in any type of term sheet or final license that we negotiate. Next slide. We have a different set of types of licenses. We have non-exclusive, we have exclusive, and each of those, the need, will inform how we end up, offering rights to a technology. Sometimes there are sponsors that influence what rights we're willing to grant, but again, that's on a case-by-case basis. And then we have some very kind of lighter touch license agreements that are called end user license agreements that are, they're not going to have the types of reporting milestones or royalty requirements that typically a non-exclusive or exclusive license would have. Next slide. So a little bit about what it takes to get to a partnership. You've heard me mention the terms below, right, in terms of CRADA, NFE, SBIR, and NDA. But again, just to reiterate, those are the types of agreements that help move a technology to an application that has market value. Sometimes a company may know exactly where a piece of intellectual property needs to be placed in the marketplace, and they may not need one of those partnership agreements listed below. But many times a CRADA or an NFE is necessary, and sometimes it's just a non-disclosure agreement to understand a little bit more about the technical details of a technology. But again, it's not, an NDA is never going to involve work, whereas a CRADA or an NFE or an SBR or TTR would enable work to occur. Next slide. A little bit about the Technology Commercialization Fund. So this is the DOE Office of Technology Transitions program. It is a funding award that it's actually been around for a number of years, but they are re-envisioning what the program's going to look like. I would encourage you to take a look at the web link that's provided, because I know that there are updates being made to the program even now. The requirements below have traditionally been the 3 items provided that you'll see on the slide deck. And I think those still remain true, but how the projects are going to be awarded going forward is changing. So again, look at the DOE website for updates, because that is something that is evolving real time. But there is significant money available here. And the point being is that the expectation is that there is an industry engagement between a company and a laboratory, and it's funding that would go to both parties in terms of how they can move a technology out of the laboratory. Next slide. FedTech Startup Studio, this may be something some of you have heard about. Again, the link on the slide is a useful place to go. It's funded by several federal agencies and corporate partners with the goal of connecting entrepreneurs to technologies developed across the federal complex. And really, the ultimate objective is to unlock some of the benefits of technologies that have been created at some of these agencies or national labs like LANL and Sandia, through entrepreneurially minded people. And so there's teams that are created to look at how technology might be placed. So next slide. SBIR and STTR, again, these are programs that have been around for a long time, and different agencies participate and fund them in different ways. We have recently kind of revitalized our SBIR STTR program, which has been really good. We've had quite a high success rate in terms of working with companies and even converting projects from phase 1 to phase 2. So if you want to learn more about how we participate in those, certainly you could email the address that's provided on the slide. Next slide. Lastly, I think I'll mention NMSBA. Again, this is a program that we share with our colleagues at Sandia, but it's also really important, and it's something that the DOE complex is quite, I would say, almost jealous of, because the state of New Mexico has been very proactive in terms of setting aside the opportunity for gross receipts tax that can be applied to supporting small businesses. The program has been around for a number of years, and again, the statistics on the right-hand side speak for themselves in terms of the success of the program. But it's something that, I think we're taking even further in the Trigger program, which I think is the next slide, and maybe the last one that I'll cover. Is that the next one, Julia? There we go. So Trigger, Technology Readiness Gross Receipts, or Technology Readiness Gross Receipts Tax, or Trigger initiative, is another vehicle to enable assistance for New Mexico small businesses who have either got a license or a CRADA from either LANL or Sandia, and it enables them to access technical assistance through a technical assistance agreement or a CRADA agreement itself. And there's more here on the slide about how the process would be initiated. But again, this is really to take NMSBA much further. Some of us joke that Trigger is NMSBA on steroids, with the anticipation or expectation that we're really, looking at a statement of work to move a technology forward, potentially create intellectual property, those kinds of things that aren't really contemplated under the smaller scope that's awarded with NMSBA. So I think in the interest of time, I will stop there. And there is a lot here on this particular website in terms of further information that may be available to us. There's lots of website links and what have you here. But we would certainly encourage follow-up from any of you if you have questions from us. And thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Kathleen. And for anyone that is interested in receiving these slides, I'm going to try and gather up the slide decks from our presenters today and get those out to everyone after our session, probably tomorrow, because this is also being recorded. And so I'll make sure that the recording is available to people. So thank you again, Kathleen. That was the perspective from Los Alamos. Now we are going to turn it over to Patricia Knighton from New Mexico State University to talk about licensing through NMSU. Let's do this. While Patricia tries to get her audio tested, let's go ahead and Dave, are you ready to present from Sandia side?
Yeah, sure. Let's pull this up. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yes.
Yep, we got you.
All right, so a lot of this is going to look really familiar to LANL. We are very similar to LANL. So Sandia Labs is based in Albuquerque. We are, like Los Alamos, a multi-mission lab, which means that we work on a lot of different technology areas. We have a lot of different missions and customers in the federal government. And we also do a lot of work with industry. And we have a lot of programs that are focused specifically on New Mexico. So some of those were touched on earlier. So I'm gonna just share some resources here that might be helpful and just talk through a couple use cases that might be of interest to this group. So again, really similar to LANL, right? We collaborate on NMSBA and Trigger. These are two programs that are focused specifically on the state. I'll talk about. We also have a couple programs that are useful for tech transfer and for licensing, and I'll go into those a little bit more. First, to start, just about finding technology, finding resources. So there are really two great places to look here. The first is ip.sandia.gov. So here you can search for available technologies by really portfolio, right? So if you're interested in bio or energy and environment, what have you, you can click on one of these icons, takes you to a list of the IP. For a lot of these, we have market sheets and a description, but what's really useful here is that you can just reach out to our licensing executives if you want to learn more about, any portfolio, any piece of technology, and beyond that, different ways to partner. So there's a whole ton of information on here, but it gets really specific on what Sandia does and what's available. Another one that again is sort of universal for DOE is something called the Lab Partnering Service. So labpartnering.org. So here, same kind of thing. You can search by topic. You can also search by lab. And once you go into the system, you can find subject matter experts at different institutions around the country. So there's 17 DOE national labs, and this is really a great place to start, as you're starting to think about, what might be useful for you and for your company. So I'm going to go briefly through some of our programs and then just talk about a couple good use cases here in the States. So again, NMSBA, this is a really good way to get into the lab. So the question of when to reach out, I would say early and often. We are here to work with you, basically. We're here to help New Mexico businesses get access to all the really cool stuff that's happening behind the gates. So reach out. If you have a question about how to work with us, what we do, what's around, we do not expect anyone to understand what's happening at the labs. The culture and the nature of the work means that a lot of what we do is held pretty close to the chest, and we can help you navigate that ecosystem. So we've worked with thousands of companies, which has resulted in a lot of jobs created. So this is a really good program if you want to get to know the labs, if you want to get to know researchers in your technical area. This is a good way to find out what's there. So beyond the technology, but again, if you have technology, this is also an opportunity to work with the people that invented it. And so this is no cost to you, does nothing to dilute your cap table. It doesn't affect your taxes. This is a tax credit exchange between the state of New Mexico and the national labs. So great resource, recommend looking into it. Trigger, very similar. You have to have a license or a collaborative research agreement to do this, but we have some really great companies. We have one business right now. So one of these use cases is a company called Z Division. And so we were approached by an entrepreneur who had found a piece of technology at the labs that essentially creates artificial environments that look very similar to the regular operating environment in a cyber environment. So what this does is it allows cybersecurity experts to essentially sit beneath the hypervisor and see how hackers are penetrating systems, what they're looking at, what they're taking, and in real time, mitigate the risk there. So it's this really cool technology. This company reached out. They said, we want to do something with this. They're a true startup. We're talking 2 people in a garage, and they had this great idea to essentially test this out using P&M's system. And P&M was open to it. They were aware of the technology. They thought this was an interesting application. And so this company applied for a trigger award and they got it. And so what this does is it funds the researcher to help troubleshoot a lot of the deployment issues that come up when you're really fielding these technologies and using them in a real life situation. So a lot of the stuff that we develop is very early TRL, which Kathleen talked about too. So we develop these concepts, these products for our federal customers. They then get matured through different channels, but this is one way to do it that is really an advantage for New Mexico companies. So another great program, highly recommend it. ESTT is another. This is another vehicle through which we support entrepreneurship, but also tech transfer. So there was a company about 2 years ago that was part of a UNM incubator at the Lobo Rainforest. And again, they'd done some research, they found some technology that they really liked. As they were talking to us, they started having conversations with the researcher that developed the technology. So what they did was they took a license It was a test and evaluation license, so very short term, very, very low cost, about a 1-year commitment. And the researcher actually left the labs through this policy program that we have, where Sandians can essentially take a 2-year separation to help launch startups, right? Or to join companies that are going to benefit from the unique capabilities that these folks are bringing. So this company basically found the technology, then found the researcher, then transferred them out to help support their company. And obviously the researcher has to want to join your company and be available to do that. But this is a really cool program, and we've seen it work really well. Where like Trigger, you get access to the people that were there when all the decisions were made about how this technology was configured, what it can do, how it's packaged, all of that. So another great program. The last thing mentioned here is we have a program called the Center for Collaboration and Commercialization. So this is a sort of suite of programs that are all based out of an office where in normal times you could just walk in and talk to people from the labs and understand what the technologies are that are around, how to work with us. We are closed, and it comes in fits and starts right now to the public, but it's in a normal time, this is a place where you can come and just learn more about what we do and how you can partner. This has been great. We've seen some really cool things happening here. So I guess one good example, there's a company that was working in canning for breweries in New Mexico. And they had this issue. They wanted to essentially recreate what happens when you open a Guinness and you get the kind of nitro infusion and you get the head on top of the beer. And they were sort of struggling with how to do this in an inline canning process. And so one of our researchers from the nuclear weapons side of the house had this really unique background in computational fluid dynamics and was able to help this company figure out the process through which they could incorporate this technology. So this was not something where they licensed the Sandia technology, but following the work that they did with Sandia, they were able to take that research, take the input that they got from the labs, and license their own technology. So it was something completely their own work. They had total ownership, and really they got a jump start and were able to accelerate that development process through their collaboration. So to close here, again, these are two good resources. I brought this up again because you should look into these. These are great ways to find just a starting point for a conversation. Again, there's no expectation that you're going to come into this space with a full knowledge of how to license technology, how to work with the labs, what the labs do. That's why we're here. And so these are great sites just to get your, I think, to get acclimated, right, and to understand what it is that we do. But my email's up here, dkiston@sandia.gov. You can also reach out to partnerships@sandia.gov. There are always people around that are available and willing to talk. So with that, Dell, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, David. We really appreciate all of y'all taking time to talk to our audience here and just about why they need to, at least if nothing else, keep licensing opportunities on their radar as they try to grow their business. Let's kick it back to Patricia. And Patricia, were you able to get your sharing and your audio situated? Are you there?
My apologies, everyone. Okay, so let's see. My slides are popping up. There we go. Thank you. And I think the echo's over now as well. So I think I'm just going to jump right in because we're running close on time and tell you just a little bit, move forward on slides. Yeah, let's see. Next slide, please. So we do technology transfer. It all sort of happens the same way everywhere, right? You disclose your IP, you develop the IP, you disclose it, and then you work with all of the fantastic programs you can, if possible, to begin the commercialization process. But ultimately, a license is the path to moving it out and moving it into the hands of a business or an entity that can actually take it to market. Next slide. And we do the same process at NMSU. I always talk to our inventors. The first step in all of this is to really be prepared and understand what it's about to invent and the criteria of the grants and contracts that are funding your research, and then understand what a public disclosure is, because those two things could take yourself in a path that is not going to result in any kind of a patent or a license. Next slide. Obviously, licensing to a partner or forming a new venture are the two primary methods, as you've heard from the other programs. So as the researchers invent and disclose, we begin the protection process. We have extensive programs. Arrowhead has, I've just pulled out a few. We actually participate in the NMSBA program. I can say that it's an excellent program that the two labs have, and they do extend that to NMSU. So it's a great engagement tool, but it's a problem-solving tool as well. We put all of our inventors and invention groups through programs. The Aggie I-Corps is a subset, if you will, or a mini NSF I-Corps, where we begin the customer discovery engagement process. And then we have programs like Studio G for our students and licensing studios for businesses and inventors to participate so that we can work through a go-to-market strategy. Next slide, please. Our activity is growing. 2020 I skipped because very little happened, and so it's culminated into the 2021 preliminary data. But we have a patent portfolio that is, what is patent is very strong, and we are working hard to move out into licensing agreements. We do a lot of material transfer agreements. One of the big areas at NMSU that's very different from federal laboratories in New Mexico is our U.S. Department of Agriculture work. And so we have researchers developing seeds and hybrids of seeds and new plant material that we often share with developers and market reach kind of agricultural entities, usually businesses, seed companies, etc., other researchers in other countries if we want to test new environments. Next slide. So just a few examples. One of the most recent licenses is actually in Albuquerque, Vic Venture, microbial filtration. We're using that for bioprocessing, and we're continuing the development. Big tooth maple is a big deal. It's a great maple tree. It's all over the Southwest. I actually spoke to my own arborist who loves the tree, and it's easy for the inventor to love the tree. Of course, it's his baby. But when you start hearing other people talk about it, it's very exciting. And that is currently being sold throughout the Southwest and the Rocky Mountain states. It's the tree that is the maple tree that has the vibrant color of a Canadian maple, not quite as vibrant, I would say, but vibrant. And there's no maple syrup coming out of it to speak of, but I think that's on the agenda for development, believe it or not. And you can see with onion seeds and such that 8 companies worldwide are using our seeds. So quite a diversity, if you will. Next slide. It all comes from research. And I'm a big fan, as you heard the 2 federal labs discussing getting involved in CRADAs and research partnerships. My experience has been that those partnerships become the fastest path to market usually. If they can result in a patent and a license, those partners in the process are already engaged with the research community, those who can help take it forth, and they're more positioned to start working with investors to finish out the process. So I put a little arrow over here at the engagement with the SBIR phase. That's one of the best ways to work with the laboratory, our lab's technology, our university's technologies, because of the funding pool. Federal agencies are funding a lot of research, And SBIR, STTRs require a lab or a university, and they are fantastic mechanisms. They use other people's money, and that engagement can start. This program that we're working through with the FAST New Mexico is the federal and state technology partner for SBIRs and STTRs. And so it's very natural to think that if you're in to learn about SBIRs and STTRs at NMSU, you might want to look at what we're working on and begin some of your ventures with our research technologies. Next slide, please. So really, I don't have a long list of licenses that I want to show you, but I do want you to be aware of our research portfolio, so that when you think of a capability, maybe even to complement something you're doing with Sandia or Los Alamos, that's a very natural thing to do. We do work with any number, all manner of federal agencies, as you can see, and we are the USDA sort of reach to the state. We are the agriculture entity here. We're a NASA space grant university as well. And so we have unique reach in, I mean, we're even doing agriculture in space research. So the whole reality of space starts to become real when you start thinking about those kinds of things. And we do partner with Sandia in Los Alamos, and we're very happy about that because there's nothing better when you think of a state ecosystem than thinking of a lab and a university partnering with a business in the state. So next slide, please. Some of the unique research and science centers where these SBIRs, STTRs, or research partnerships and licenses can come out of include some of the more interesting ones here are the animal health and food safety. We are all very eager to move forward with some of this research we've been doing. Food safety and food security and the food chain is getting a lot of attention. A healthy food chain for the world is at stake, and some of the technologies and food security technologies at NMSU can really support some of that. So you keep an eye out, you'll see more and more on that. We have bio-inspired geotechnics. We are doing work in biomedical research, a lot of smart grid, water, and energy research. We've just set up a solar testing site at Arrowhead in Las Cruces, and that's a pretty unique spot to actually test solar related projects. And that, again, an SBIR and STTR or research engagement early can result in having the first place at the table for a license, even considerations of exclusivity. Physical Sciences Laboratory sponsors a lot of tests and evaluation of all things from satellites to unmanned air vehicles. And so we kind of, that's a secure kind of facility. And so we can offer a lot of opportunity for unique collaborations, particularly with the defense related industries. And water infrastructure, again, transportation, all of those things are very much alive and rich at NMSU. So keep that in mind. If there's not a patent already to license, there's probably one being developed. Next slide. We also look towards the future. And if we're in the IP tech transfer office doing our job, then we should be seeing a lot of intellectual property resulting from these research areas. And the most exciting thing about collaborations is when they actually begin at the research stage. So when you think of, sorry, I lost a bullet there in one of the hot areas of artificial intelligence and machine learning. These are all areas where we have multi-college collaborations going on. And that's very exciting because you get a chance to, for example, put artificial intelligence and machine learning combined with something in the bio or ag area or engineering, and you get results in specific areas. So the licensing opportunities in that space should become very rich. Energy, environment and water, food production, safety, science and security, all of these are currently funded work that are internal collaborations, and we are certainly open and inviting others to collaborate with us on that. Transforming STEM education is actually very interesting. It's an area where our licenses in copyright, trademark might grow quite a bit too, and that is because we have unique ways now of developing transformative educational paths. So that's a very interesting area. And then internal funding, kind of our IRAD or internal funding to, I say IRAD, that's Independent Research and Development. You guys at the labs have a different name and I can't even remember it anymore, but we're doing that in the areas of cybersecurity, biomed, quantum, and of course, space commercialization, leveraging the test facilities, the expertise from our space grant work. Next slide. So I say join us in collaborations and then talk to us more about licenses. And now you can contact me directly. We're a small office. There's only 3 of us. Sophia's on the line. Aaron might be on the line. I think he has a class this afternoon. Our email addresses and phone numbers are right there. And we work hand in hand. We don't have a giant organizational thing to maneuver. You just call us and then we talk and then we meet and we look at the best place to work together. Look forward to talking with you all more. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Patricia. And again, thank you to our 3 presenters today. Before we open it up for some questions, just as a reminder, I dropped it into the chat, but I will be gathering the contact information, the slides, and then a couple of other things from today's presentations. And I'll try to get that out to everybody by the end of this week because I do need to put the recording for this session up as well. And I wanted to touch really quickly on something that all 3 of our presenters talked about. When you think of working with a research institution, it's not just that pathway of, hey, we've got this great technology, come pay us and come license it from us. It is really about that collaboration. It's about that working together to stand up the innovation ecosystem across our fair state. And what can we do together to make it a better place and a better environment for your business to grow? Each one of our presenters talked about the fact not only do they have licensing opportunities, but there's a lot of support, a lot of development, and a lot of technical assistance that each one of them can bring to the table. And then some great programs like the NMSBA, where all of them participate and all of them can provide that necessary support to help you take that next critical step in getting a product into the marketplace. So we do have a few minutes for questions. If anyone has a question they would like to ask to any of our presenters or any of their support staff that are on today, please just unmute and ask your question. We'll give people just a minute here, but if no one has any, the recording should be up by tomorrow. I'll get again the slides together, get contact information. I want to make sure everybody has a really great data packet that is sent to them on, hey, not only were here the presentations and the contacts for the people that talked, but here's a little bit more information about the programs they talked about. So be on the lookout for that. And then also in that email, I will share one of the playlists from our patent series that this is the final effort on, let's call it, where we really took a focus on people often have a lot of questions on how do they patent their technology, how do they grow their portfolio, and it's just a lot of information is not focused on businesses. So we went through, had 3 presentations on that. I will make sure to send that to everyone as well and share that. And it does not look like we are going to get any questions. So thank you again, everyone. And as a reminder, if you do have questions, if you do want to speak to one of our representatives, most of them have dropped their contact information into the chat here. I will also be sharing that with everybody. please do not hesitate to reach out to any of our presenters today. You know, the research community across New Mexico really loves being able to work with our small business community, because we are kind of that heart of, there's this great big problem I have, there's this technical issue that I just cannot solve, or how do I tap into the resources that will support me? And at the end of the day, that's what all of our institutions are about. Yes, you know, we all have our research focuses and our missions, but being able to support the economic growth of our communities, the innovation ecosystem that surrounds our state, the great things that come out of the work that y'all as entrepreneurs are doing to launch innovative products, to get things into the market that has an unmet need, or that kind of untapped value that nobody's ever thought of. That's really what we love doing, because it shows that we have a great backbone of support and development resources. So thank everyone again for presenting. Thank you all for attending. And we hope that this informational webinar was useful to you as you try to look at, what is my go-to market plan? What is my path forward? And what are all the resources that I can tap into as a potentially struggling, hopefully thriving entrepreneur, and getting your information launched and getting your product out into that marketplace. Thank you all.